Tim, this is mostly a family-friendly show. I don't feel comfortable talking about Adam West naked.
He's not actually naked, Paul. Adam West Naked is just the title of the DVD. He sits in his house fully clothed and talks about all the Batman episodes.
I'd rather talk about some of Adam's distinguished film work later in his career. What about The Happy Hooker Goes Hollywood?
Holy Indecent Exposure. That one should be called Adam West Half Naked.
To the Bat Poles!
Welcome to the Bat Poles, where we talk about Adam West while fully clothed. This is Tim in Tokyo with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Fully clothed, it's only about 50 degrees out this morning.
And our theme version this time was by the Ronnie Kole Trio. Discogs doesn't say when this came out, but come on, what year did it probably come out?
I'm not even going to guess.
I mean, we have not seen very many 1967 recordings of the Batman theme.
And certainly nothing before 1966.
It's either 66 or like much more recently. But yeah, it's a nice jazzy version. I sent this to Paul and said, "Yeah, wow, Daddy-o."
I like the maniacal laughter, which sounds not dissimilar from Frank Gorshin's. But then there are those two gunshot sounds that sound kind of like whip cracks, like they're not allowed to finish off. They're just like the tape is cut a little bit before the end of the sound, and so it's like there's not that much gunfire or whip cracking on the Batman show that I remember.
No. Well, unless it's Catwoman's whip in the first Catwoman.
Right, that little riding crop. It's a passable version. It's a little different from what we're used to, so yeah, I'll give it a thumb up.
Yeah, me too. I was lucky enough to get this recording before the video disappeared from YouTube. I was like, what? Where'd it go? There is another one on YouTube that I'll link to. The recording quality is not as good on that one. It appears that they just plopped the record on a turntable and held a mic up to it, not unlike us doing our radio station when we were kids.
Yes, I was trying to remember the other day what brand that little turntable was, that little record player that Grandma and Grandpa gave us. It might have been just some kind of generic JCPenney brand or something.
Boy, I cannot remember.
It was not a close and play.
No.
That much we know.
It was not much higher quality than that, though. Paul and I called it the record ruiner because it would create skips on your records.
Did we ever change the needle on that thing? Well, this is a totally different conversation.
I don't think so. Anyway, before this becomes to the phonograph, let's get into our topic. So we are talking about, yes, Adam West Naked, the DVD release from 2009, which is about 3 hours of Adam West at his home in Idaho talking about the Batman show. And I don't remember where I heard this, if Wally said it or one of our other guests, or if I read it somewhere, but, 2009... there was still no certainty that Batman would ever be out in home video. And Adam was, getting older and afraid that he wasn't going to live to see the day when Batman did come to home video. Right. And so he wanted to get his thoughts down in some form. Of course, he'd already put out the Back to the Batcave book, but that didn't dig as quite, not, well, I mean, it had the episode guide in the back, but he goes into a little bit more detail about the episodes in this. Not a lot more, but, and, you know, it's fun to see him, you know, at his home, and he makes some, you know, really dry jokes, as he usually does. And so that part of it is fun. It's just frustrating to watch because there are so many points where he doesn't remember things correctly. And some of them are the same stories that we saw in his book, or even, at least in one case, in Bert's book, the story of the real tigers in the pit under Robin in the first Catwoman, which, you know, yeah, holy insurance rates. We're endangering our actors.
Holy hyperbole.
And even when he's remembering things correctly, he doesn't come up with enough context sometimes, and you're like, what are you talking about exactly? You know, unless you've like memorized every Batman episode, it can be a little hard to pin down what he's talking about. And there were even some things that I had previously noticed when we watched the shows for, you know, our episodes. But then when he talked about it in this, I didn't know what he was talking about until I went back and actually looked at the episode. Like where he's talking about in the Minstrel episode, and Clock King is mentioned, and he says it's too early because Clock King that show hadn't been broadcast yet. I was like, what? I misunderstood what he was saying. I thought he was saying that at one point he missaid a line and called Minstrel Clock King, but that's not what he's talking about.
Yeah, I thought that's what he meant at first as well, but then I think I caught up with him.
Yeah, well, there's the place where Batman and Robin are. They're not at GCPD. They're I think at the stock exchange, and you know,
yeah,
Gordon is like concerned, like, can you face this threat? And you know, Batman and Robin start listing some of their other villains. You know, like after facing Catwoman and King Tut and Clock King and Archer, you know, that we shouldn't have any problem with this minstrel dude.
As always, Batman, we'll play it however you wish, but we can't help being concerned about you.
Commissioner Gordon, after Penguin
and Archer,
Clock King,
and King Tut and Catwoman,
and all our other artful adversaries, I don't think we'll have too much of a problem with this minstrel.
So that's what he's talking. And, you know, I had noticed at the time, that's funny, they're talking about Clock King, and that episode hasn't been broadcast yet. You know, maybe it's an Easter egg for the future.
Well, very frequently, even the first time villains show up, regular villains show up in season 1, there's always an again about them. Like, oh, the Penguin again, or the Joker is back.
Sure.
So I don't remember if there's any reference to Clock King having bedeviled Gotham City before this. But, you know, it wouldn't be completely out of line for them to mention villains who haven't appeared on the show yet and still imply that they've been tangling with Batman in the past.
Sure, but I think his point was that the audience had no idea who Clock King was.
Right. He wasn't even a comic book character. I don't believe. Was he?
Well,
not in that form.
I think there had been a Clock King in Flash or something.
Oh yeah, we talked about that. I remember. In fact, I think I brought that information to the table, which has slowly drizzled out of my ears since then.
We need to listen to our own podcast more.
You know, I think I remember you saying that once.
Many times.
But I've forgotten all about it. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, when at times that I have gone back and listened to our podcast, like, oh yeah, that's right. Anyway.
Dang, we were good then. What happened? So, can we talk about the format of this of these 4 discs? or the discussion that Adam has with us?
Well, how many discs? It originally was a 2-disc release. The one that I got is just 1 disc.
Okay.
But it has 3 hours of content on it. Although the one that this is a really difficult thing to get. I happen to be able to get it on eBay. Now, this packaging of it comes with a disc of Batman the movie.
Oh.
So I now have 2 discs of Batman the movie. And now the really weird part about this is the case has a place for 3 discs, and someone has put in the 3rd disc slot the special features disc from the Batman DVD set.
Huh.
So I now have 2 of those also.
Wow, that's funny. I don't have the special features. I just have the movie, I think.
I'm talking about the DVD set of the show.
I see.
In the season 3 package.
Oh, got it. Okay.
The special features disc is in there.
Got it. Okay.
Which is something that I've always thought we should talk about on the show, except once I watched it, I was like, there's not much here to talk about. But I don't know, maybe someday we can
maybe someday
talk about that.
I've been looking for an excuse to watch that disc anyway. I just never got around to it. Another piece of our lore or, catchphrases from our past. Primitive memes, if you will.
I'm not sure why we're having a particularly hard time sticking to the topic this time, but...
Well, I think I can explain that. I found this pretty disappointing, to tell you the truth. There are lots of good things about having Adam just in front of the camera for a nice long time. I felt like, in a way, it felt kind of intimate. Like, he's sitting there in his basement, his cruddy looking basement, by the way,
which he says reminds him of the Batcave.
Yeah, except it has no technology except the furnace, and not even a giant penny out of the memorabilia that's sitting around down there. He's got a picture of the photo shoot of that famous Life magazine, Adam West leaping in the air moment, and a few other tidbits. I think maybe a Bob Kane painting, perhaps, and his cowl, or one of his cowls. But, and I enjoyed some of just his, the dry humor that you mentioned. Like at one point he's sitting outside that, he does do different locations. He's sitting by that fountain, I guess, in somebody else's yard, apparently, because there's...
Well, at least that's the joke. I think it's probably his yard, but he says, oh no, the real owners are coming, and he runs away.
Yeah, those antics are kind of funny. But when he's sitting out there, he hears water running. I guess the fountain comes on, and he says something like, is that the fountain coming on, or did one of my neighbors stop to take a... Oh, well, anyway, he suggested someone's urinating in the fountain because he hears the sprinkling sound all of a sudden. Moments like that are funny, and, toilet humor coming out of the mouth of, the distinguished Batman / Bruce Wayne is always kind of hilarious to me just on the face of it. But I guess what I found disappointing about it was that it's just kind of the material that we know, from recycled from the Back to the Batcave book, and a lot of it is frankly semi-fictional, as we know as well. Some of the anecdotes he tells are anecdotes that we know he's been telling for a long time that seem not to be accurate.
Yeah, like that he ad-libbed "What a Way to Go," which we've seen is in the script.
Right, and I don't want us to get into some kind of flame war with folks who want to believe that Yvonne Craig and Burt Ward and Adam West are always telling us exactly the way things happened. But it is just kind of frustrating. And of course, I've had like a really busy week, and so I was actually mad at poor deceased Adam West last night as I was trying to get through all this material. It's like, please give me something else. Give me another nugget. But I guess we'll just have to be satisfied with the fact that he did sit down and do this. And I had forgotten completely that this was done earlier than there was any notion that the series would finally make it to Blu-ray because of all of the, the problems of rights having to do with 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers.
Yeah, so that was still 5 years off at this point. I don't know. I took down some. I mean, in my notes, they're a mixture of inaccuracies, and increasingly as I go through, they're more just kind of interesting bits, which I hope are true. You know, I have no proof that they're not, but I'm going to assume that they're true because he does say true things in this DVD also.
Well, we found out that Cesar Romero wore his own watch as Joker, and that watch was given to him by the president of Mexico. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So the director of A Riddle a Day and Fine Finny Fiends, he pronounces his name Tom Gries. Rather, we had pronounced it Grease, I think, before. So
because Grease is the word.
Yeah, it's the word that you heard. It's got groove. It's got meaning. But yeah.
We don't think Adam West is all that funny, but at least we can crack each other up with jokes that are even worse than his. Sorry, I thought he was pretty funny most of the time.
Yeah. So we got a pronunciation cue there. If we ever review the series over again, we'll know how to pronounce Tom Grice's name next time. He talks a couple of times about Cesar Romero's wig falling off and that they gave him a different wig, but I was kind of waiting for the punchline on that story. I felt I wanted something more there, and there didn't seem to be any more.
Yeah, there were other moments like that as well. Like, I thought he was building up to something about Victor Buono that never really came to pass either.
Yeah, well, I was interested in that in his pronunciation, he says Victor Buono.
Buono.
It was the third season, as I said earlier, and we were cutting costs a bit with the sets and so on. Victor Buono returned. Victor, not Bono or Bono, but Victor Buono returned as one of my favorite all-time characters, King Tut.
Rhymes with guano. So I wonder, is that how Victor pronounced his last name? Buono?
Well, I think it's worth giving that the benefit of the doubt, since he actually knew Victor Buono and spent time with him on set and all of that, and seemed to really appreciate Buono. Now I'm going to call him Buono just because Adam did. Yeah, I mean, he says something about Buono's weight, that he weighed something like 350 pounds, which seems incredible to me, that he could weigh that much. But he wasn't a very tall person. But Adam does say how much he admired the King Tut performance and everything that Buono did.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin Podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin Podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Are you tired of fanboy comics podcasts? Looking for a show that really appreciates the comics storytelling medium and how it works? A show that looks at comics from any genre and anywhere in the world, comparing the storytelling techniques of different creators in different comics cultures, with manga, newspaper strips, European comics, and more, discussed alongside mainstream US comics. A show that includes talks with well-known creators like James Robinson and Dan Jurgens, and with less famous creators that you really should know. And hey, we'll even critique your comic. If you're looking for that show, then you're looking for Deconstructing Comics, and it's right here at deconstructingcomics.com. Also available in iTunes and on Stitcher. This is Tim saying check out our show on Wednesdays. That's Deconstructing Comics.
He talks about Van
Let's
Williams.
let's
go
get
ahead.
get our Vans correct. You're talking about Minstrel or Green Hornet?
Yes, the Minstrel.
So that's Van Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking at the DVD booklet just to make sure. Yes,
Thank you.
Van Johnson is the Minstrel.
Why I persist in getting them mixed up, I'll never know, because
I do the same thing.
Anyway, Van Johnson, the Minstrel, right? What was the story that he told about him? He was a huge star for MGM, which I guess is true. Oh, that's not what I was thinking of. I was thinking of how he talks about Neil Hamilton. That Neil Hamilton was like a major star in the 40s, which is not true.
Neil Hamilton, of course, was Commissioner Gordon. Now, Neil and Caesar were both big stars in the 40s. I believe that Neil Hamilton was under contract to Paramount as, a big leading man. And before that, he was like a shirt model.
He was a major star in the silent era, or at least he wasn't even really a major star. He wasn't like, Douglas Fairbanks levels of stardom in the silent era, but he showed up in a lot of silent films. And then in the 40s, by that time, I think he was mostly, playing secondary and character roles. But then he says that, Hamilton was a shirt model before he was an actor. And that must have been like in the 1910s. Because he's already appearing pretty regularly in, silent Hollywood films by the mid-20s.
The interesting kind of thing about this video was how unproduced it is. I mean, there's no theme music. There's no, opening sequence or anything. It's just like you're watching his home movies, which you basically are. There does seem to be some editing. You could see some cuts here and there, but it seems so primitive, kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, the conceit of it is that he has set up 2 video cameras in his basement, at least at the beginning, and they're both filming him simultaneously, and then there's cutting back and forth between the 2 angles. So sometimes we're seeing him in profile, and sometimes we're seeing him in full figure, in full
or
view.
Sometimes both.
Yeah, sometimes the 2 are side by side. And the other part of the conceit, which is kind of humorous, is that he's apparently hiding from his family, whom for some reason he doesn't want to know that he is recording this, video for the fans. And he talks about this quite frequently, that he's doing this for, all the fans who enjoy the show and want to know more about it and, want to hear him specifically talk about it. But his daughter comes down to, tell him dinner's ready at one point, and she just asks what he's doing in the basement. But he's been, talking this whole time. So you'd think that maybe she'd be, have her cell phone ready to go and think, Dad, why are you talking to yourself in the basement? And she calls the men in white coats to come and pick him up. But that conceit clearly is, totally contrived, which also made me wonder if the notion that he's setting up the cameras himself is all kind of contrivance too. But who knows? It is definitely made to look as much like, something that, Grandpa's doing in his basement as possible. But I did notice that there is not just the video editing, but also some sound editing. There are moments where, really loud background noise just pops out momentarily when he pauses, when he's speaking. So, some processing was done by somebody in a sound room, somebody in an editing room.
Well, and then there's the yodeling gag.
Oh, man, it's great to get outside and breathe this fresh air. Ah, what a day. I found that a good yodel keeps the wolves away.
Yes. Which comes off quite well. He's got his hands in front of his mouth. He's moving his jaw at the right, it's synchronized with the yodeling. So clearly they put a lot of care into that 15-second yodeling scene.
But I was impressed with how he was able to give the episode titles with only a few errors. And I was wondering if he was like shutting off the camera or editing out the parts where he looks in the back of his book to get the titles. I mean, he seemed to be saying them off the top of his head, struggling to get some of them occasionally, and giving the number of the episode also.
Yeah, that's what made me wonder if there was a guy with cue cards or a teleprompter, working in the basement as well. We don't have any other evidence of it, but and he does seem to be speaking off the cuff a good chunk of the time. But West has always been someone who sounds kind of like he's reading something even when he's speaking off the cuff, probably because he has that kind of radio announcer, demeanor to his voice and his presence.
I did notice, in terms of episode titles, Part 2 of the Season 2 Shame, the incorrect title that he gives is also in his book and in Joel Eisner's Bat book.
Oh, what is that? I didn't catch this.
The actual title is It's How You Play the Game. But this DVD and those two books say it's The Way You Play the Game. The way instead of how. And I'm clearly he's getting that error from his book. I don't know where it came from in his book. Did he look in Eisner and get the error from there, or the other way around? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. It could be that when he was researching Return to the Batcave, he used Eisner's book as his guide and just perpetuated the error, which is something we've talked about as a problem of cross-referencing when it comes to the misremembered anecdotes that we keep hearing about the show.
Or all the other maybe more scrupulous, more careful, I should say, writers about Batman who use Eisner's Bat book as a source and pull out things that we have our doubts about. I was interested in the story about Puzzler that originally it was a Riddler story, and I think he mentions that, and Gorshin wasn't available. So they were going to call him Mr. Conundrum, but the producers thought it was too close to Condom.
That was hilarious and can't possibly be true. Can't possibly be true. I mean, maybe it could. I don't know. But it struck me as just a dry Adam West witticism rather than a true story. Not sure why, but would people have been that concerned about condom showing? I mean, it wasn't a word that was used very frequently, and as far as I know, in the 1960s.
Yeah, I mean,
I could be completely wrong about that.
I'm sure that there were no TV ads for condoms because that was an issue in the 80s, whether there should be TV ads for condoms. So in the 60s, no.
And besides, Trojan Man would have been competition for Batman. Trojan Man.
When he talks about how, he says that Batman cliffhangers were water cooler talk in 1966.
The cliffhangers, I guess, became like the water cooler talk, and they were really fun to devise and work out, believe me.
And I really want to believe that, because it's fun to imagine if I had been old enough at the time that maybe I would have been participating in that discussion myself.
Hang it out of the water cooler. If you'd been old enough to go to a water cooler when the show was first on. I wondered about that too, not least because we know that season two eliminated the recaps in order to try to push people into watching part one and not just catching up with Batman by watching part two. So maybe not so much water cooler talk as not talked about at the water cooler enough during that first season.
more than once in this, he'll say, one point in particular, he talks about how for a few, I think he says 5 years, I think it might have been more than that, after Batman was canceled, he had a really hard time getting work because of typecasting. But he kind of minimizes that. He says he feels fortunate to have gotten a signature role as Batman. And maybe by 2009, I mean, he was now, getting work from the former kids who loved him in their childhood.
Right, lots of cartoon voice work, including being the mayor of Queequeg on Family Guy.
So I mean, I can imagine
Queehog? Yeah. Anyway,
saying he would say that in the 21st century, but I don't know that he would have said that even in the 1980s.
Yeah, I don't know either, because I'm thinking of at least one or possibly two different Adam West movies that I saw on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Were they pre or post Batman movies?
Oh, definitely post Batman. They were like 80s straight to video, pieces of crud that he appeared in as like a police captain, the grouchy police captain in one of them, and they were just awful movies, and I felt really terrible for him. But that was like 20 years after Batman had finished up. So I wondered about that too. I'm sure that he had the rose-colored glasses on by the 2000s when he was getting a lot of work, and Batman was the reason why, instead of the reason why he wasn't getting acting roles.
A little other investigations that I did because sometimes he'll talk about the death trap or about some blooper in a way that I can't. It's so kind of seems so fuzzy to him, and he's like, he talks about a wall being on fire.
There was a scene in which Batman, the wall caught on fire. Now the guys got a little too enthusiastic, the special effects guys, and I mean that whole wall was on fire. So I did this a lot, and I think actors do that. You try to use whatever's around you, any little breeze that might blow through, you try to adjust and use it. The wall caught on fire, so I decided as Batman to use my cape as a matador and fight the fire. Choro, choro, ho, hot, hot. And my cape caught on fire. And I tell you, people were too stunned to do anything, because I was running around the stage with a flaming cape.
And then he tried to put it out, and he set his cape on fire. I imagine he's talking about instant freeze when the curtain is on fire in Princess Sandra's hotel room. That must be what he's talking about, because he does try to put out the fire with his cape there.
Right, but you get the feeling that he may be mixing up things that happened on camera with things that actually happened on the set. I mean, in the sense that, he was trying to put the cape... When he talks about that scene, it doesn't seem like he's talking about a scene. It sounds like he's talking about trying to be a good citizen and putting the fire out on the set. Rather than it being a staged scene with, stagehands, just out of frame range with fire extinguishers getting ready to put it out.
Yeah, or there's one place where he's talking about, it's something in season 2, I don't remember which episode he attributes it to, where he says Oscar Rudolph had mispositioned the camera and so you could see blank space beyond the wall. I looked and I couldn't find what he was talking about there.
Do you know what he's talking about when this might be in the second hour or so, about the time that my eyes started to really glaze over? He mentioned something about he's supposed to pick up a piece of paper and he picks up a Kleenex.
Okay.
Or no, he's supposed to pick up a Kleenex or a tissue, and instead he picks up a pice of paper.
That's exactly the one I was going to talk about now.
Okay, good.
So it's in Death in Slow Motion.
I thought it was a Riddler episode.
Oh, for the real trivia buff out there, Frank Gorshin as Riddler left a large pie when he took off, and I looked at the pie, and I was supposed to pick up a piece of Kleenex or something, but instead, because I couldn't see down out of the cowl, and it was always a problem with peripheral vision, I picked up a piece of paper by mistake and looked at it, put it down, and then picked up the Kleenex. So for you guys who are really trivia buffs and want to see a mistake, that was just a little moment of kind of an error.
Right, he makes many references to his lack of peripheral vision when he's wearing the cowl.
And he mentioned a pie, that Riddler had left a pie. So I knew which scene to look in, at the bakery in part 1.
Right.
The two, I don't know if they're like accountants, I don't remember, but the two people who are working at desks in the bakery have been knocked out by being hit in the face with cream pies filled with sleeping cream. Buy it at your local drugstore, sleeping cream. So in that scene, when he and Robin walk in, and, Riddler's gone, and the two people are still asleep at their desks, and you see Batman pick up a piece of pie crust and then put it back down, and then he picks up a handkerchief that's on, like, the edge of the desk in front of him, on the edge that's towards him. So now he seems to be looking like straight down. He's bent his neck, so he's looking down. But that handkerchief is so close to him on the edge of the desk that I can imagine that he would have missed it with his peripheral vision blocked by the cowl. And that he takes the handkerchief and seems to use it to sample a bit of the sleeping cream, and then he sniffs the handkerchief. And identifies the sleeping cream. So, he's misremembered what the things were that he was supposed to pick up, or that he accidentally picked up. He did not accidentally pick up a piece of paper and then put it down and pick up a Kleenex. He picked up a piece of pie crust, put it back down, and picked up a handkerchief.
Well, that explains a lot, because he sounds like he's going to start telling a story about the pie.
Yes.
He mentions the pie. So I thought that's what I was thinking of when you mentioned a few minutes ago that there were some, stories that, like the story about Romero's wig, that seemed to be going somewhere and then just kind of waste away. That was the story that I thought was going to be pretty interesting, and it would have been pretty interesting if he told us what actually happened. But perhaps he forgot that this had something to do with the pie. I mean, the guy was, in his late 70s, early 80s by the time he did this recording.
The episode that he says had a misplaced camera in it is His Honor the Penguin.
Episodes 51 and 52 were called His Honor the Penguin and Dishonor the Penguin, one of my favorite characters, Burgess Meredith. It was nice to have a regular return to the show, because we had so many one-shot villains in season 2, and Burgess I always enjoyed. The blooper, and there was one in episode 51, our director George Wagner, a lovely man, shot the opening scene, and the camera was misplaced so that for the first time you could see empty space to the side before the wall, so it looked like we didn't have a set, we didn't have a wall. But if you look for that, it was a huge error, but we just left it in. It was kind of funny.
But George Wagner did not direct His Honor the Penguin. Oscar Rudolph did.
Okay. So
he's either misremembering the director or misremembering the episode. But I don't remember ever seeing a scene like that. It might be something that was cut. I think we've talked before about how actors probably don't sit and watch all their old work and may not quite be aware of what got in and what didn't.
Right. Their memories are based on their experience on the set rather than the experience of seeing how things wound up inside the frame in the episode itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can think of lots of episodes from season 3 where you can see, you know, you can see behind sets. There's even one moment in, I don't remember which episode it is, where Batman and Robin come in a doorway at the top of the stairs, and the doorway clearly doesn't go anywhere. Like, they must have had to kind of hide behind the door before coming out, or they would have been clearly on the other side of the door in camera view. But anyway, lots of scenes like that in season 3 where you feel like you can see way more of the background of the set than you should be able to, like what's behind the stage.
There are a couple of places where he talks about things that we have noticed and saying that they're mistakes that got left in, like, which episode was it? Where, it's Death in Slow Motion, where Bruce and Dick are running to the bat poles and run into each other.
Yes.
Yeah, he says that was an error and they left it in because it was funny. I believe that. That makes perfect sense. Also, when whatever episode it was in season 2, I think it must be Sandman, when Batman is riding on the back of the Alf cycle and ducks to avoid the roof, the ceiling of the Batcave, that duck was not planned. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Another thing that stuck out to me, because we have discussed this very issue on the show, the change in the Joker's character. And, you know,
right.
And a lot of our listeners have pointed to Pop Goes the Joker as the point where Joker becomes less threatening and more silly. Adam tags that earlier. He says Joker's last laugh.
Although Caesar was really great as usual, I felt that his portrayal of Joker, and you'll probably notice in this episode, was less threatening and more comedic, which seemed to work, you know?
So I thought that was interesting, because I have not heard any listeners say that was the point where Joker changed.
Yeah. Just trying to remember what happens in that episode. Oh, yes, this is the episode where Robin nearly gets pressed into a comic book, correct?
Right. Although, as Adam tells it, they were both almost pressed into a comic book.
The cliffhanger in this episode was a giant printing press in which they would stamp Batman and Robin into a comic book. Somehow that seemed kind of appropriate, because that's the way we started as a comic book. May end up as a comic book if I keep this up. What do you think?
Another thing that he's not quite remembering how it worked. Some things I think maybe you didn't stay awake for in season 3.
Yes, folks, I'm going to admit it right now that I did not watch this all the way through because I simply didn't have the total of 3 hours to spare. But luckily Tim takes up so much of the slack, as he so often does. Thank you, Tim.
So in the Penguin Lola Lasagna episodes, of course, Bruce Wayne's horse is Waynebo. According to Adam, the writer originally had it as Mikimoto.
Now, I called my horse. Bruce Wayne owned a horse. And they wanted to name the horse Mikimoto. Japanese horse, I don't know. But I said, no, not Mikimoto. It's Bruce Wayne's horse. Let's name the horse Waynebo. Well, Waynebo. Ha, mystified. But anyway, that's what they did. The horse was called Waynebo.
He mentions the Joker's flying saucer, that at the, they knew it was going to be the last Romero Joker.
This was Cesar Romero's last episode, The Joker's Flying Saucer. It was about Martians and space ships, things like that. Again, I was kind of unhappy because it was Caesar's last. And when our director yelled cut at the end of Caesar's last sequence, Caesar ripped off his wig and gave a hoot and threw the wig out. He was great.
He mentions that he first met Yvonne Craig when he was playing tag football with Elvis.
It was decided, yes, Yvonne Craig was a beautiful, wonderful little actress. And by the way, I met her through Elvis Presley. I used to play tag football with Elvis occasionally in a park in Beverly Hills. And one day, Yvonne Craig, who'd been in 2 Elvis movies, came over, and that's where I first met her.
That's not a story I'd heard before.
No. Gosh. This must have been when he was sort of quasi-courting her while married, Elvis, that is, not Adam West, on the set of one of his films.
Right, as we saw in her memoir. And he talks about teaching Burgess Meredith to drive the Batmobile for Penguin Go Straight, because he says it was kind of a tricky thing to do.
I had to teach Burgess how to drive the Batmobile. It was a little tough to drive. The suspension, the brakes, it was, it didn't corner too well, but he did a good job.
And also in Joker's Last Laugh, when Alfred impersonates Batman, he says he gave Ellen Napier Batman walking lessons.
Ellen Napier was delighted to have Jan Kemp and the wardrobe people create a Batman costume for him. But he actually wore my cowl. And what they had to do was pad it out a bit in back because Ellen said was shaped, a little differently in back. And Alan asked me, he was a wonderful man, he asked me if I'd teach him how to walk as Batman and move as Batman. And I said, sure, Alan. And he tried to do that, and I think it had a great result.
I thought that was so great.
Walk like Batman. Not walk like an Egyptian, but walk like Batman.
Or walk like a man, talk like a man.
Walk like a Batman.
After reading Alan Napier's bio, his autobio, I should say, his memoirs, I can believe that Napier would have asked West for some lessons like that, just because that was the kind of actor he was.
Yeah.
Oh, so Elvis films that Yvonne Craig co-starred in were It Happened at the World's Fair in '63 and Kissin' Cousins in '64. So it would have probably had to have been during the making of one of those films that West supposedly met Yvonne Craig while playing touch football with Elvis.
I guess.
Not going to pass judgment on whether it's true or not true. Just saying that would have been the timing, probably.
Yeah. Do I have anything else to say about this?
I'm not sure that I do. I don't want to be derisive, and I don't want to be catty or batty about this, because part of me, the fanboy in me, really appreciates that he did this at all, and it's nice to kind of spend time with him. Yeah. At the same time, it's just I don't even know whether I would recommend it, except to the most dyed-in-the-wool fans of the show and of Adam West.
Oh yeah, it'd be meaningless to anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. So that makes it easy. That makes it easy to make the recommendation or not.
And I don't want to sound like I think that he's consciously lying about anything here. I think a lot of it is just, memories fade. And, he's recording this, more than 40 years after the show was canceled. So...
No, I believe there's no malice whatsoever here. No attempt to remake history because he feels like it or because he wants to put himself in a better light. I don't think that at all.
And I'm not even sure if he would have had it available to watch. I mean, of course, we know that Mark Hamill managed to get a copy of the entire series back in the 70s.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if Adam had like film copies or not DVDs, but maybe VHS tapes, or more likely nothing. I don't know. So, yeah, he was just relying on his memory, most likely.
Right. And the memories of Burt Ward.
Mm-hmm. But, I was wishing, that I didn't know so much about Batman so I could enjoy this more. If I were a more casual viewer. But on the other hand, I was sort of wishing that he had instead been able to record an actual commentary track for the DVD release of the show, so that he could have had them in front of him as he was commenting, and we could have, he could have had his memory refreshed in real time as he was he was talking about it, and so we would have gotten a more accurate commentary.
Yes. Alas, that was not to be, but it certainly would have been probably more recommendable had that been the case.
I don't know that I ever listened to the entire thing, the commentary on the movie DVD with Adam and Bert. I've listened to some of that. In fact, I've included clips of some of it on the show before. But that I think actually I did listen to the whole thing once. That is interesting, and I think more accurate than a lot of the other content of memories we've gotten from Adam and Bert.
Right. I asked Tim this morning, since I wasn't able to listen to the last hour or so, or watch. I keep saying listen to, because there were large chunks of this where I closed my eyes to listen to it, because I wasn't really getting much out of the visuals, because it's really just him like either talking to the camera or being shown in profile in front of the camera. But I asked him this morning, since I wasn't able to listen to the entire thing, maybe we should make this a two-parter. And then we both realized that no.
No, there's not that much to it to merit a two-parter, unless we were going to deconstruct every single thing that he misremembered and explain, no, actually it was this, but a lot of our listeners know that already.
Sure. If you haven't read, Back to the Batcave, then, I would recommend this to you if you'd like to hear kind of the audiobook version of Back to the Batcave. Although there's not very much about his pre-Batman life here, the way that there is in his memoir.
No, this is specifically remembering the show and remembering things related to each episode.
Exactly.
Oh, one other thing I did want to mention, which, I don't know, this is something that we don't get too much on the show, the lighting. Where he talks about, early in the season 2 program, he talks about them adding purple gels to the lighting in the Batcave.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious to, compare some season 1 Batcave shots and some season 2 Batcave shots and see if I can tell the difference. Yeah, and I wish we knew a lot more about that aspect of it.
Right. Well, I love the idea of having purple gels in the Batcave. Kind of, special mood lighting for, those quiet evenings when you're, up against the Bat computer and looking at your, giant lucite, your bat lucite map of Bat Gotham City. Did I say enough bats? And, having a nice glass of bat wine and sitting there under the purple lights.
Or if you've convinced Catwoman that you're under her spell and you've taken her to the Batcave and she's making eyes at you, you've got nice lighting.
Isn't there something you'd like to do, Batman?
Yeah, I got your message, Catwoman.
Isn't there something that you want to do? Now that we're standing almost mask to mask this way?
Indeed. Yes, a little mood lighting. One last thing. He talks about the scene from, would it have been the final Julie Newmar Catwoman arc, in which they're in basically the Green Hornet's apartment?
Yeah. Catwoman goes to college.
Yes, and he discusses that as though it were like a single take. And I think he's right about that up to a point. But he says, we did it in one take. It was like a 7-minute shot or something like that. And I didn't go back to check it. But, he seems to be mostly right about that. It would be interesting if it were, done in a single take, because it seemed like it would be hard to do that in a single take since there's so much choreography going on, so much blocking, between the characters as they move around in the space. But I frankly don't remember whether it's a single take for most of that scene or not.
I think there are reverse shots. Certainly the memorable reverse shot from behind Julie.
The dirty old man market strikes again.
That's what I always think of when I think of that scene.
The return to the dirty old man market.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, but again, that may be a misremembering that happened because, of course, if they were doing an establishing shot, they would do a full take of the entire scene from, establishing shot distance, and then they would shoot coverage, reverse shots and such that they could edit in later.
Well, yeah, I did not go back and look at that, but...
Yes, but, remembering the behind Julie shot, I think is enough to suggest that there's there's definitely more than one shot in that scene.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
Coming up, Adam West talks about his favorite thing in Batman's utility belt. Holy Deja Vu returns. And we read your mail in the Bat Inbox. Help support To the Bat Polls and all the Deconstructing Comics shows with a monthly donation to the Deconstructing Comics Patreon page at patreon.com/deconcomics. For just $2 a month, you get outtakes from every To the Bat Polls episode. Plus, Paul and I make bi-weekly videos for all patrons, usually featuring a TV trivia quiz. Our most recent video discussed famous TV themes and TV cars, and the civilian names of Batman villains. Patrons can also vote in polls for which Bat topic you'd like us to cover next. Further perks at higher support levels, including the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month, and hours of podcasts on the early issues of The Amazing Spider-Man and on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So go to patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
Anyway, I don't want to complain about the costume because it was fantastic for what it did for me and the show and my career. I'm lucky as an actor to have had a definitive role. See if I can bring you back. Is that right? A definitive role, For an actor to get a signature role is really a nice thing, because so many of my peers weren't that fortunate. But maybe they were the guys who were laughing and making fun of me for having played Batman. I don't know, but I think I got the last laugh here. Speaking of laughs, about this time of the show, Cesar Romero didn't want to wear the wig that he had because he kept losing it in fight scenes. So we gave him a green wig that stuck. I mean, he may still be wearing it. I'm not sure. These episodes were called The Joker Goes to School and He Meets His Match, the Grizzly Ghoul. In this particular show, it was the first time that Batman whipped it out. Batman used the bat shield. That was like my favorite utility belt device, because you pull this little thing out of your utility belt pocket and it becomes this huge shield that protects both Batman and Robin from any kind of mortar fire, whatever, bad jokes even. And the way we worked that out, I had a guy on the floor, and at a certain word in the script, I would snap my finger casually. And at that point, I would do this, and he would be handing me the shield, fully extended. So it seemed to work. It was a little early movie magic, because we had no computer help or whatever. In this particular episode, Caesar played it a little looser and more cartoonish. And here's a little point for you to win a bet somewhere. When you see Caesar's watch, it wasn't a prop watch. It was really his watch, which he would never take off. It was a gift from the president of Mexico, and he was very proud of it. And anyway, he had great energy, and he was wonderful.
Sir Geoffrey, I wonder if I could speak to you for a moment.
Oh, certainly.
Poopsie, we're going to look after your suitcases. Come along, Ralph.
I thought you and I ought to have a little talk.
Mr. Douglas, that whole incident in Monte Carlo was a misunderstanding. I didn't know it was your wife.
No. When you what?
Well, you see, I mistook a... well, you know how things are.
You're wasting your time. Why don't you catch the next train back to New York?
Yes, you do carry a grudge, don't you?
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about the symphony that you came... You see, Hooterville...
Mr. Douglas, I can assure you that I'm not easily discouraged. I've founded orchestras in much worse places than this. Well, not much worse, but I'm not the man to run away from a challenge. If there's the slightest spark in a community, I can fan it into a flame.
Oh, that's good, because all these musicians belong to the volunteer fire department.
Please.
Well, as they say, you're the conductor, Poopsie.
Holy Deja Vu. Lisa Douglas has become charwoman, as she says, of the Culture Committee, and they vote to create the Hooterville Symphony Orchestra. Oliver thinks the whole committee is nuts to try to start an orchestra when they'd need 110 musicians at least, and Hooterville doesn't even have that many people. Lisa persists, but they need a conductor. She digs out the phone number of Sir Geoffrey Wingate, who they had run into on their honeymoon, and Oliver thought was flirting with Lisa. Oliver also thinks Sir Geoffrey is a phony, but Lisa was convinced by his claims to be an experienced conductor, and she refers to him as Poopsie.
With all the charm a Gabor can muster.
She calls Poopsie in New York. He assumes that what she calls Hootersville must be an artist's colony, and Lisa must have a lot of fashionable friends. If you've ever watched Green Acres, you know that illusion was dashed as soon as he stepped off the train.
Mm-hmm.
But hang on a second. This British accented chap seems familiar. Was he on Batman? Indeed he was. His name is Reginald Gardiner, and he played Mr. Park at the Park Gallery in Pop Goes the Joker.
Aha.
Internal injuries. I'm going to die.
I hope you do, you finagling fiend. Batman, did you see what he did to the pictures? Priceless works of art destroyed forever. Think of the loss to posterity and the loss to my profits.
Gardiner started out in minor roles on the West End stage in London. IMDb's first credit for Gardiner is an uncredited dancer at ball in the 1927 silent film The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog, directed by...
Alfred Hitchcock.
That's right.
Yes, he's in the flashback sequence in which the lodger finds that his sister has been killed, which then, ratchets up his desire for revenge. But of course, for the whole of the film, we think that the lodger, may actually be the murderer until the very end.
Gardner's Hollywood film debut was in 1936 when he appeared as a policeman in Born to Dance, starring Eleanor Powell and Jimmy Stewart. One of his most famous roles was as Schultz in The Great Dictator in 1940 with Charlie Chaplin. He also appeared in The Man Who Came to Dinner, The Doctor Takes a Wife, Christmas in Connecticut, and The Flying Deuces with Laurel and Hardy.
Yes, one of their better efforts.
In 1956, he had the title role in one of several unaired 1950s pilots for Mr. Belvedere, based on the 1947 novel by Gwyn Lays Davenport. Of course, Mr. Belvedere would finally get made and broadcast in the 80s.
Yes, had quite a healthy run for some reason.
In the 1955 Alice in Wonderland TV movie, Gardner played the White Knight.
Man, everybody was in that TV movie of Alice in Wonderland.
He was, of course, required to appear on Batman because he'd been in a 1964 episode of 77 Sunset Strip.
Of course.
There's a law about that,
Yes, I do. They would have revoked his green card if he hadn't appeared.
After 1967, he stopped working in film. He lived until 1980, but I don't know what he did in the intervening years. Before quitting film, he appeared in 17 episodes of The Pruitts of Southampton, renamed The Phyllis Diller Show. He had roles on Bewitched and Petticoat Junction in 1967. Of course, his Batman appearance aired that year, too. And in early 1968, he appeared on The Monkees as a butler, as British actors in America have often ended up doing. Just ask Alan Napier.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, Wikipedia mentions that Gardner often played butlers. So,
Yes, in the American industry, that makes complete sense.
Right. So that's Holy Deja Vu of Reginald Gardner.
Nicely constructed, Tim. I appreciated the suspenseful revelation of his appearance on Batman. All right, it's time for another exciting episode of Bat Inbox, about our Dozierverse Stumbles episode, including the Greenway Productions attempts at Wonder Woman and Dick Tracy, the pilots of which we discussed.
Yeah.
So take it away, Tim.
First of all, on Twitter, Chuck Coletta at Bowling Green State University on the Dr. Pop Culture BG account says, FYI, believe it or not, but Gargles was actually a minor 1946 Tracy villain and includes a panel of Gargles, of course, gargling. And yeah, I mean, that list of potential villains for the show, we kind of laughed at it because they all sounded ridiculous, and it still is ridiculous, but it was made up by Chester Gould and not by the writers for Greenway.
Right, they're ridiculous and legit, not mutually exclusive categories for Dick Tracy villains.
Gargles is also mentioned in Camden's post in the episode thread on the all-seeing, all-knowing 66 Batman message board. Where he writes, the Lon Chaney Jr. as Pruneface is highly likely to be non-associated with Dozier's Dick Tracy pilot. And he tried to include a picture that actually didn't appear on the message board. I don't know what picture it was supposed to be. Well, he says, pictured below is a photo that features John Chambers with his makeup creations for not only Pruneface, but the Brow, Flat Top, and Mumbles, all in the style of the early 1960s UPA animated series and not Gould's original artwork. But yeah, apparently there were other attempts at Dick Tracy for NBC before Greenway's attempt. Yeah, I noticed on the photo, or at least, yeah, it is the photo on Tappa Talk of John Chambers working on a prune face makeup job, there's a little caption right on the photo that says John Chambers does the prune face character for a Dick Tracy pilot for NBC. The pilot was never shot. And of course, we know Greenway shot a pilot. It didn't have prune face in it. So it sounds like there was an attempt at another pilot, but they didn't even get as far as Greenway got.
But they certainly got pretty thick into the makeup and prosthetics business of getting ready for the pilot.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't realize that UPA was responsible for the Dick Tracy cartoon from the early '60s. UPA is the same company that gave us, for better or for worse, Jim Backus as Mr. Magoo, and the quite rightly famous Gerald McBoing Boing cartoon, which was revived in the early 2000s briefly on Cartoon Network.
Camden goes on, the format document you shared and the scripts and story treatments that were available didn't mention them. I guess he means those villains. It was interesting that you both theorized that they wanted this to not conflict with the comic strip, which may have been a request from Chester Gould. He apparently wanted more input on his character's translation into other mediums in his later years, which was a factor into why the eventual Dick Tracy movie got made after his death. That raises the question, maybe the reason that this Dick Tracy pilot never made it to air was that Chester Gould had complaints?
That would be worth digging into the Greenway archive to see if there are memos related to it in some way.
The villains, Gargles and Needles, mentioned in the format were actually Chester Gould creations that appeared in the 40s, so there may have been an option to have older and deceased villains from the strip appear in the show if it had been picked up.
In zombie form, no doubt.
As for the origin of the picture, this could have been for the NBC pilot that apparently was being developed before Dozier's turn, and the Dick Tracy... I'm not sure what he means here. The Dick Tracy Soaky in the center of the table gives the impression that this may have been for an advertisement, but it seems unlikely that such high production values would be utilized for a commercial. Bill Mumy did a number of Dick Tracy merchandise, namely toy guns, commercials, but never got a chance to face down real villains from the comic strip.
I think Soaky might have been a brand of kids shampoo that came in cartoon bottles. In fact, I think Adam West actually has an Adam West as Batman Soaky in Adam West Naked. That kind of bobblehead one.
Okay, so take the next one.
Okay.
Now I have edited these down somewhat. There are parts that are in strikeout.
Right.
We have to. We don't want to be here all night. So, yeah, go ahead.
That's true. Okay, so High C writes, I think the problem with Dick Tracy is in the premise, and it ran into a couple of problems Batman had. Much like with the original concept for Falseface, makeup costs would be prohibitive to bring Tracy's own actual rogues gallery to live action. Yes, just the 50 bumps in the brow's forehead would probably be enough to drive most makeup people into hysterics. But without them, and that obviously seemed to be the plan, you lose the flavor of Dick Tracy. Remember, one of the knocks on Batman, especially the front half of Season 2, was that there were too many made-for-TV creations and not enough of the big four villains. The audience didn't like the newbies. I could see a similar problem here. There is an expectation with Dick Tracy that you are getting these classic villains that are part of his universe. Without them, he's kind of a high-tech Joe Friday. That reminds me of how much the voice singing, Dick Tracy, he's a good cop, sounds like Jack Webb attempting to sing. Basso profondo. As for the bizarre Mr. Zero test scene, it reminds me of a later TV movie that was inspired by this novel, which, lo and behold, was published in 1962. Things that make you go, and this is a novel called The Girl Who Has Everything? No, The Girl with the Gold Watch and Everything, sorry. And there's a link here.
Yeah, he links to the Wikipedia entry.
In which the watch of the title is used to freeze time. Interesting catch. Nice, High C. So he goes on to finish up. I guess the Zero would be a hero, yuck yuck, paging Stanley Ralph. But where are they going with it? So he freezes the baddies, figures out their plans, and then thwarts them. And that will be interesting for about, 2 episodes, if that many. Yeah.
That did cross my mind, too.
Mine too.
Okay, next, Scott Sebring. I think the inherent problem with the Dozier office in regards to made-for-TV creations is that their writers were not comic book writers, and the production team didn't even understand comic readers, and what made a lasting comic villain character work in the first place. Thus, the newbie villains came across like knockoffs or sketch comedy caricatures, much like the one Milton Berle did, especially Season 3, baby, Groovy. And he includes a video of the Milton Berle sketch, and this might have been from Hollywood Palace, featuring Adam, Van Williams, and Bruce Lee, where Berle is playing an actor who is playing the villain on both shows, and they're rehearsing simultaneously. And he's running back and forth between
between Green Hornet and Batman sound stages.
Mm-hmm. But I watched it today. It's a one-note joke with some non-PC elements to it besides. Because one of the villains is an East Asian villain.
Oh, Lord.
With a Fu Manchu mustache. So
and Bruce Lee just had to stand there and take it.
Yeah, I had that thought too. You have an actual Asian in the room. You're really going to do this?
Yep, and they were, because Milton Berle. Okay, Danny Cool writes, that's interesting. Yeah, I can totally see that. The stories that worked best leaned most heavily on the source material. The campiness, in the case of Batman, came from the writers not fully grasping what they were doing. The further that the writer deviated from the source, let's use Semple in the 66 movie as an example, the less it worked. Because the anchor of the comic book source was no longer there to ground Batman in his natural habitat, the pages of a comic book. Oh, I was going to say a cave, but yes, the pages of a comic book. You're absolutely right, Dan.
Okay, Batwinged Hornet. This was a pretty long one. I did edit it down somewhat. Another winner, guys. You were wondering how films like the Wonder Woman short were used, and you were on the right track by theorizing that it was aired for the networks. Even very successful producers still needed to go the, quote, proof of concept, unquote, route when trying to get a new series greenlit, as in Irwin Allen's case, when he produced short pitch films for The Time Tunnel, Land of the Giants, and City Beneath the Sea. As we know, Tunnel and Giants became series, but City did not, leading Allen to produce as a TV movie for NBC in 1971. I'm almost sure you're aware of it. Actually, I was not. I'd never given it any thought. But The Green Hornet also had a test film with 2 notable casting differences. Jan Murray was the Hornet, and Richard O'Brien had the Mike Axford role instead of Lloyd Gough. Actually, Miss Case is also played by someone else, Cindy Wood, rather than Wendy Wagner. So Bruce Lee is the only person in the test film who was in the series. So it was, and yeah, definitely this Jan Murray character was not as good as Van Williams. It was a really good call to replace him. Going on, about writers Stan Hart and Larry Siegel, I really disagree with the criticisms about their contribution to Mad. I would strongly suggest Siegel played a major role in building the Mad that became the most famous satire magazine of the 60s and arguably part of the 70s. Yes, more than often overrated National Lampoon. Being pessimistic, among other things, was the point of Mad at the height of its creative/pop cultural powers, where digging into and exposing the parts of humanity others pretended did not exist, for some, based on their Ozzie and Harrietized sensibilities, was the joke. It was not limited to Hart and Siegel. If you read Berg's The Lighter Side of feature over the course of, say, 20 years, you would find stinging commentary about everyday life along with the usual Roger Kaputnik material.
Well, I can't really change my 8-year-old opinion of Stan Hart or Larry Siegel. I would say, just to double down a little bit, that what bothered me about it then, and I might have a different reaction, reading it today, was what I can only identify as a kind of nihilistic cynicism, worse than just pessimism, which is how I put it in the podcast. Just the sense that, like, there's no hope for humanity. That everything is corrupt.
It wasn't really funny to us.
I did not find it funny at all, no. But again, I was 8 or 9 years old when I was reading, Kyle's Mad books that were all from that period.
Mm-hmm.
I love the just knock 'em all down satire of Harvey Kurtzman's Mad from those first few years. But I did not find that nihilism and cynicism of the Larry Siegel years all that funny. I found myself obsessively reading it anyway, I have to say. Maybe because it was grown up and there were, occasional sexual references that I thought were, like, incredibly interesting, but I had no idea what any of them meant. So again, reading, if I were to reread those stories now, I might have a different opinion. But at the time, I just felt kind of like ucky after reading that stuff, because it's like, what's the hope? There is no redemption for the human race. It seems pretty obvious from reading this issue of Mad Magazine. So, and let me quote Bart Simpson when I say that Bart Simpson, reading a contemporary copy of Mad in the 1990s in an episode, said, "Wow, they must really have it in for this Spiro Agnew guy." That the success of that cynicism in the 1960s might have made it a little difficult to pull Mad into the decades following. Mm-hmm. But that's just an opinion, and I respect your opinion as well, Bad Winged Hornet.
Finally, Crazed Villain 2 says, I could see the Wonder Woman pilot as a segment on Love American Style, Love and the Wonder Woman. A final scene added, meeting up with Steve Trevor. It's an interesting idea.
I could totally see that too. And hey, man, you put that letter in green. I was supposed to read that.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. I got up on my anti-Larry Siegel soapbox there for quite a while, so I think that's fine. I'm just joshing you, Tim. I'm just timming you, Josh. No, wait a minute. I had it right the first time.
So, did another poll of the patrons for our next topic, and next time we are going to follow up on the test scene script for Mr. Zero that we talked about in episode 168. We're going to look at that other document from the American Heritage Center that I mentioned. We have it now, and it turns out not to be a script. It's a 40-page description of what the show would be, including an 18-page summary of the first episode.
Oh, I'm salivating a little. This will be really fun to dig into.
By the time you hear me saying these words, the document will be available on the message board at 66batman.com. Set up a thread for it so you can comment on it before we record our episode, and we can incorporate some of your comments into the show.
But Tim, I just heard you say those words. Where's the document? Oh, right. You're speaking to the listeners.
The listeners, yeah, not you. No, I'm posting on the board as we speak here. Okay, so we'll see you again in 2 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed. Check the show notes for the one remaining YouTube video of the Ronnie Kole Trio version of the theme, and links to the Mr. Zero document and the message board thread to discuss it. Batpolls at deconstructingcomics.com is the address to send us your Bat missives or any interesting Bat audio that we haven't used yet on the show. We're on Twitter at Decon Comics, and we're on the Deconstructing Comics channel on YouTube. You can hear outtakes from this and every episode of To the Batpolls and vote for topics for future episodes by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. You can also help us out by sending a one-time PayPal donation to batpolls at deconstructingcomics.com, by shopping via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, by sharing our episodes on your social media, and by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And spread the word. Let all your friends who are Batman 66 fans know about the show. Next time, we discuss Lorenzo Semple Jr.'s 40-page description of his unproduced TV show, Mr. Zero. Don't stop time or the next episode will never get here. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Batman! Batman!
To the Bat Poles is a production of deconstructingcomics.com.